Today, we are pulling back the curtain on something you see in pretty much every movie, but might not always think about: product placement. It's this deliberate strategy that has totally changed how movies get made, and honestly, how we experience them. So, let's dive in.
Yep, that Aston Martin? It is absolutely not there by chance. It's the result of a multi-billion-dollar industry built on putting brands right into the story. But to really get how product placement got so powerful, we first have to look at the advertising world it completely turned upside down.
You see, for decades, the 30-second TV commercial was king. It was everything. But in our modern world, well, that king has pretty much lost its crown. Marketers suddenly started facing this whole host of problems that made it harder and harder to reach you, the audience.
It really was a perfect storm for advertisers. First, you have ad clutter, which basically means we were so bombarded with commercials that our brains just tuned them out. Then, the remote control came along and turned zapping past ads into a national pastime. But the final nail in the coffin? DVRs like TiVo, which let viewers skip commercials entirely. For advertisers, this was a total catastrophe. All their expensive messages were just, poof, vanishing into thin air. They desperately needed a new playbook.
And that new playbook, well, it came from Hollywood. The thinking was, if audiences are going to skip the ads between the shows, why not just put the ads inside the shows? This wasn't just some clever little trick. It was the birth of a whole marketing revolution.
So just to be super clear on what we're talking about, this is the paid, intentional inclusion of a brand right into the movie itself. That can of Coke sitting on the hero's desk, yeah, it's almost never there by accident. It's a deliberate, strategic partnership between a company and a filmmaker, and it's designed to be seen by millions of people.
And it is big business. I mean, seriously big. By 2010, the market was projected to be worth a staggering $14 billion. Brands figured out that a single appearance in a hit movie could be way more valuable than hundreds of old-school commercials. But what was the moment that really, truly convinced everyone of its power?
Well, it all comes down to one of the most beloved films of all time, a friendly little alien, and a fateful business decision about candy that would change marketing forever. We're talking, of course, about the story of E.T.
So, picture this. The year is 1982. A young director named Steven Spielberg is making a film about a boy who befriends a lost alien. In this one key scene, the boy, Elliot, needs to lure this shy creature out of the woods. His plan? To use a trail of candy. And Spielberg's first choice was, naturally, the most popular candy in America, M&Ms.
So, Spielberg went to Mars, the company that makes M&Ms, and they turned him down. Flat. And why? They reportedly thought E.T. himself was so ugly he might actually scare children, and they didn't want their candy associated with a frightening monster. Oof. It turned out to be one of the biggest marketing blunders in history.
But Spielberg didn't give up. He went straight to Mars's biggest competitor, the Hershey Company. He offered them the spot, and they said yes, suggesting he use one of their lesser-known products at the time, Reese's Pieces. Hershey agreed to a $1 million promotional deal, and, well, the rest is movie history. The impact was immediate, and it was unbelievable. After E.T. became this global phenomenon, sales of Reese's Pieces skyrocketed by an incredible 65%. That one single placement turned a pretty niche candy into a household name. After that, you better believe every brand in the world wanted to be in the movies.
Okay, so now the industry was totally sold on the idea of product placement. The next big question was how to do it right. And it turns out there are two main schools of thought. Basically, do you want your brand to shout, or do you want it to whisper?
Researchers have a term for this. They call it prominence. It's really just a measure of how much a product demands your attention. Is it big and right in the center of the screen? Is it there for a long time? Does a character actually talk about it? All of that adds up to high prominence.
So let's break that down. A prominent placement is just impossible to miss. Think of a character not just driving a car, but saying something like, "Man, I love my new Ford Mustang." It's hitting you with both audio and visuals. A subtle placement, on the other hand, is just kind of there in the background. A can of soda on a desk, a logo on a laptop. It feels more natural, sure, but you might not even consciously notice it. So the trade-off is pretty clear: high attention versus a more organic, natural feel.
And prominent placements? They come with a very prominent price tag. For the James Bond film Die Another Day, Aston Martin reportedly paid around $70 million to have its V12 Vanquish featured as Bond's main car. For that kind of money, you're not just a background prop, you're a co-star.
And this leads us to the really big question for marketers. Which one actually works better? A prominent placement gets noticed for sure, but does that actually make it more persuasive? Or could it even backfire and just feel like a commercial? Well, researchers designed an experiment to find out.
To put it really simply, they wanted to know if a brand is better off shouting for your attention or just whispering in the background. And what they found is that the answer, well, it completely depends on how you already feel about that brand.
So here's the really clever way they tested it. They looked at two key things. First, was the placement prominent or was it subtle? And second, how did the audience already feel about the brand? Did they already like it? Or were they kind of neutral or maybe didn't like it? This setup let them see if a shout works better for a brand everyone loves, like Coca-Cola, while a whisper might be better for a brand you've never even heard of.
And this experiment wasn't just theoretical. Researchers actually brought in 153 student participants, showed them clips from a movie that had different product placements, and then they measured how their attitudes towards those brands changed before and after they watched. And here's the crazy part. You'd assume the loud, obvious placement is always better, right? Well, the research found the opposite can be true. For brands we don't already have strong feelings for, a placement that's too in your face feels like a sales pitch, and our cynical, built-in ad blocker brains just put up a shield. But a subtle placement? It can fly right under that radar, influencing us without us even realizing it, which can make it way more effective.
What all this shows is that product placement is a really delicate art. When it's done right, it's an incredibly powerful tool, but it's also a super high-stakes balancing act for these brands.
It's a very high-stakes game. The upsides are huge, right? You get incredible exposure in a blockbuster, high recall rates because people can't just skip it, and that positive halo effect from being associated with a movie star. But the downsides? They're just as real. It can be incredibly expensive. Marketers often have zero control over how their product is ultimately shown, and if the audience feels like the movie is just one long commercial, they can turn on both the film and the brand.
So the next time you settle in for a movie, pay a little more attention. Notice the car the hero drives, the computer they're using, the soda they drink, and ask yourself, are you watching a story or are you watching a sales pitch that's hiding in plain sight? Because that line is blurrier than ever.